the hardest place to read the label is from inside the jar.
Yeah.
So when we're inside our circumstance, we can't see necessarily, like it's so obvious to everybody else. We're like a walking billboard.
You are listening to Personal Development Mastery, the podcast that empowers you with the simple, consistent actions to take that will help you create a life of purpose and fulfillment. I'm your host, Agi Keramidas, and this is episode 406. Have you ever found yourself repeating some kind of a cycle over and over? Different events, but similar patterns. If yes, would you like to break free from that? By listening today, you will gain insights on how to break free from negative repeating cycles, those recurring patterns ingrained in our mindset. And you will also understand the value of trusting your inner compass and embracing authenticity, whatever your age. It's a fascinating conversation, and I hope you find it of tremendous value. Before we dive in, if you enjoy listening and appreciate what we're doing here, the simple, quick favor I'm asking of you is to click the subscribe button. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to speak with Christine Jewell. Christine, you are an author, keynote speaker, and faith-based executive coach with over 25 years of experience. You are also a high-level athlete, multiple business owner, podcast host, wife, and a mother of 6. You are passionate about helping high-achieving individuals break free from superficial lives, redefine success, and create fulfilling and purposeful relationships and lives. Christine, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to speak with you today.
Thank you for having me. What an honor to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here, and there are quite a few things that I would like to discuss with you. And let me begin maybe by your story, and in particular that story of, you call it rebuilding from the ashes, and I think many people can relate to that.
Yes.
So I want to ask you if you can give the short version of the transition period, because I understand that you were very successful in your career and with multiple entrepreneurial projects. At the same time, professionally, a professional athlete and a mother, but that was not all that was fulfilling in your life. So if you can take me to the time before the transition point, or so we can just get an idea of how your life was then, and then we'll speak about what changed it.
Yes. Okay. I will absolutely do that. And before I even start with my story, I would love to just kind of give you all the punchline of that I think that people can relate to is, two things. Number one, we always repeat what we've experienced in our past until we decide to break the cycle. Mm-hmm. So we're always repeating what our body remembers and the programming that's been installed. So just think about that, as people are listening. And also I want to invite people to consider that we're what God has for you next. You're going to need to pack light. You're going to take only what's essential and let go of the rest. And so my story is just, I write about this in the book, but I grew up in a home where the modeling was a very high performer, high achiever. My father came from the CIA background, Navy, CIA, ultra high performer, always driving, always pushing, operated as a lone wolf. I mean, you have to kind of to be in that space. And so I observed this drive, this strong drive, always having to prove yourself and succeed and perform, but also the drive that really destroyed my father through alcoholism and addictions to other things that ended up destroying him. And so I started at the gate saying, you know what? I'm never going to be like him. I'm never going to be anything like him. So I set out on a quest to be the exact opposite of everything my father was, except for the fuel was the same. I still needed to prove to myself and prove to everyone else that I was going to be different and successful, but I was going to do it different. And here's the thing. I started at 23 building my first business with my ex-husband. We built a CRM company, over 10 years. We had a highly successful, life from the outside, the house, the vacations, the business, $7 million that year, 40 people in an office overseas, but everything was built on sand. Right? It was like a big illusion of everything on the outside. And then that ended up in a divorce. So that completely burned to the ground because we didn't have anything solid glue holding our marriage together. And we didn't have like true unity in our marriage. We were just doing what the world taught us to do. And then I repeated again for another 10 years. Okay, so I'm 48. This year I'll be 48. But, by the time I was 30, I found myself divorced with 3 very young children and walking away from this entire life and lifestyle that we've built and having to rebuild everything from the ground up. But if you don't deal with the root of what created that pattern in the first place, you end up repeating it. So as I talk about in my book, I'm a warrior. I have bought the program that everything has to be hard and conquered. And it takes a lot to beat me down. And so I went through another 10-year cycle of repeating the same lesson again, building another business from the ground up. Was very successful financially, built a team. We had hundreds of clients. I was training and coaching people at a world-class level as an athlete. I was, rebuilt my whole identity, but again, found myself disconnected in my relationships, exhausted in my body, 10 years later, face down on the floor going, what am I doing wrong? Why do I still feel so empty, so disconnected? My face is on the outside of the building. I look like this really fit, beautiful woman who I should have it all. On the outside, maybe it looks like I have it all, but on the inside, I was like screaming and so frustrated and tired. And that was really the moment where I said, I remember like God coming and saying, okay, are you done? Like, are you done doing this your way? Doing this? Would you like another 10 years like this? And I thought, no, never. I'm not doing this ever again this way. There's nothing wrong with success, having beautiful things, but I knew I wanted an amazing marriage and I couldn't figure that out. I knew I wanted a different spiritual life. I knew I wanted to have freedom, mental freedom, emotional freedom from being slave to my business or slave to, my clients or the schedule and everything. So I really made a decision. I was not going to create again from the fuel of pressure, of fear, of the program I knew, and I needed to learn a completely new way to do life, business, relationship that really was fueled from a place of peace, mental freedom, and to be honest, like inspiration instead of the drive to move away from something. So here we are today. I'm in North Carolina with my husband, my amazing husband, which is the right man that God has for me. And we have a joint business together and we're doing work that we love. And we have 6 kids between the 2 of us. And it's amazing. And we operate from inspiration and we're co-creating together. And it's very life-giving instead of life-draining.
Absolutely. And there were many things with what you said. And thank you for sharing this in such a succinct way, this story. You mentioned, and that got my attention, that you repeated a second cycle because you hadn't realized that the first one was a cycle. Can you tell me, when did you realize that they were cycles, that it was not just another series of events, that they were related in some way, or in other ways that there was something similar driving this over and over again? Because many of us find themselves in situations like this, but they don't necessarily realize that it is the same pattern repeating. They think it is something else and then something else. But that would be interesting to clarify a bit more.
Unpack. Yes.
Yes.
Let's go into that. I'm so glad you brought that up. You're the first one that's actually asked me that, even though to me it's so blaringly obvious. But it's obvious when we're on the other side or someone on the outside is looking in.
Mhm.
I heard somebody say the other day, the hardest place to read the label is from inside the jar.
Yeah.
So when we're inside our circumstance, we can't see necessarily, like it's so
Yeah.
obvious to everybody else. We're like a walking billboard. But the easiest place to we are repeating patterns. We are living patterns all the time. 95% of what we do is just repeating repetition. We're in the automatic nervous system, right? So whether we think we think we're not, you are either repeating a pattern or creating a new pattern. And so, because we always repeat what we remember in our nervous system and our mindset, right? Our belief systems, and everything else is just overflow of that. And so I did get to the place where you're absolutely right, Aggie. I was like, oh, it must be him. It must be my employees. Clearly, I need to fire this person and get somebody new. And I got tired of actually saying it was always someone else
Mhm.
because I realized that everywhere I went, there I was reliving the same relationship dynamic. Now, the
Mhm.
person's name was different. It was a different man, but it was the same dynamic. It was the same drama. It was the same chaos. It was the same emotional tension that was just showing up with a different name, with a different outfit. It was the same core issues within our team,
Mhm.
right? It
Mhm.
was the same core, like the roots are the same, even though the leaves look different, And so finally you start going, okay, wait a second. What are the common denominators here? First of all, everywhere I go, whether it's work, relationship, whatever, these things keep presenting themselves. So maybe I get to look at who the one is that's showing up and creating these things consciously or unconsciously. And then what are the things? What are the familiar drivers and wounds that we repeat? And so I started looking at three things. Number one, what was the pattern of my identity, what I believed about myself, who I thought I was,
Mhm.
who I thought I wasn't. Um, Secondly, is like, what was really driving me, right? Was I chasing something, a feeling, something? And what was the driver of that? Which was often, to be honest, when I got real with myself, I realized like anger was a lot of the fuel that I had been creating from,
Mm.
or pain, like wanting to avoid something of my past or never experience what my mom experienced in her marriage, what my dad ended up with. Like we're always running away from something or we're running to something. So I had to really get real with myself and say, okay, what am I running away from? And what am I running to that I think this next relationship or this next business deal or this next thing is going to provide for
Mhm.
me? Because we're always chasing something because we think it's going to give us something that's often available to us now. Like peace is available now. Not once I get the boat or once I get the next trip or once I get it's available now. And the problem is, we're always often living in the gap. I know you referenced Dan Sullivan on one of the recent
Mm.
podcasts I was listening to your verse. And he talks about living in the gap. And we do this. It's like we're on the beach, we're looking at the sunset, and we're not enjoying the sunset or the beach. We're living like in the water in between all the time, treading, getting tired instead of like, can I enjoy and be where I am and experience, peace, freedom, joy, whatever it is here, while also being excited about where we're going.
If you enjoy this episode, can you think of one person that would find it useful and share it with them? I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow and you will also be adding value to people you care about. Thank you. And now let's get back to the episode. It's a great point, and I'll go back to something you said that you stopped at some point creating from fear and from
Yes.
the program that you had, and you started
Mm-hmm.
creating or co-creating. You said with your husband out of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so my question is, when we are, let's say, we are in the other state of creating based on a fear or um, programs or wanted to prove something to ourselves or to others, as you were saying, or different examples. The challenges in that case, I think they are obvious, and I think a bit more, a bit less, each of us has faced it when we go against what we're meant to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of
Mm-hmm.
challenges happening. My question is
Mm-hmm.
the opposite. When you took the other direction, when you created out of inspiration, were there still challenges, or was there it was an easy flow and things started happening for you? And I don't mean of course that you didn't have to do work, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
were there different kind of challenges? I don't know if the question is clear.
I think so. Well, I'll just share what's coming through for me in my heart. We said at the beginning, we're just going to talk heart to heart. So I'll
Exactly, and
share
my
what's coming through.
question was not in my notes. It just came right now, so I thought, okay, there is a good reason that it popped up,
There's a
so
good
let me
reason.
ask it.
Yes. Okay. So let's go back to that. We're always either creating from inspiration or desperation, anxiety, something we're trying to avoid. I don't want to feel the pain of losing that thing. I don't want to feel the pain of my spouse being disappointed, right? I just wanted to bring that up real quick because a lot of us, it's not so much that we're afraid. The anxiety, the anxiousness is that we don't want to experience an uncomfortable feeling. So what we're doing, we call it fear, but it's actually like I am worried about feeling something that's going to be uncomfortable for me. And I don't want to feel that. And it's funny because we're feeling it anyways, because we're anxious and pressured. And so when I made the decision to say, you know what, like I'm going to operate from inspiration, inspira, right? In spirit. If you look at the root of that word, like in the breath of God, connected to the breath of God, connected to the spirit. And I think that's so beautiful that is the root word. It means you're breathing in and you're literally operating in union with and from the very breath of God that is alive in you, which is inspiration, which is ultimate creative power, which is so beautiful. So here's the shift, right? When now we're saying, okay, I'm going to operate from inspiration, it often will move you, always, not often, always moves you into the unfamiliar territory, the unknown. And it's designed that way because we're going into the blank canvas of the new identity, the new creation, what God has for us. We're going into, right? And it requires partnership with the spirit, but also it's not familiar and it's not supposed to be, because if it was familiar, you would be repeating the past. So you wouldn't, it would not be inspiration. It would just be comfort and repetition.
Yes.
So I think that when we raise our hand and we say, yes, that sounds amazing. I want to co-create and I want to be operating from inspiration. Get ready, because it's very exciting. But now the excitement that used to be worrying about an unfavorable outcome becomes the anticipation and the excitement and the wonder of expecting a favorable outcome that you have no idea what that's going to look like. So you start trading your anxiety for anticipation and excitement in the unknown, which requires a lot of faith. And a lot of courage, right? And a lot of trust, because now you don't have a solid future to trust yourself, because you don't know what you're going to create. You don't know what the outcome, like when we were talking about the podcast, you've done 400. I've done, 150 plus one before. Like now I'm inspired when I'm stretching the conversations. But when I started this process, I didn't know who's going to listen. Are people going to respond? Like there was so much having to show up and face all of those insecurities of, well, who do you think you are? Is anyone going to listen? Like, what if nobody shows up? And you have to just press in and you have to trust. And remember, I've done hard things before. I've done uncomfortable things before. I've done new things before. I've created before. And so we get our trust from looking backwards, but our faith by looking forwards. And so it's, the challenges that come is you're going to be tested on all of your insecurities. You're going to be tested on all of the doubts, and you're going to need to learn how to normalize operating in the unknown as a norm. And that requires you to cultivate a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's a muscle. Trust is a muscle. Confidence is a muscle. Faith is a muscle, and a willingness. I would say willingness is probably the biggest thing, to do things we've never done before, to go places we've never gone before, to have conversations we've never thought of having before, to share from our heart like we never have before. So that's one of the key questions I ask people is like, are you willing to go where you've never gone before? Because get ready, things are going to start showing up that you've never done before, and you're going to start feeling really inadequate and insecure. Congratulations. We're moving in the right direction. Right?
Yes.
If it's familiar, you're probably moving in the wrong direction.
Yes, you remind me of that phrase that all progress happens outside the comfort zone. But by definition, it can't happen in the comfort zone. You can't change. It's the same. I liked what you said about getting your trust by looking backwards and remembering what you have achieved and so on. There was something else that I want to hear your thoughts about regarding the outcome and detaching from the outcome in particular, because it is, well, we very well know that we can only control our effort and not the outcome. But somehow many of us find ourselves clinging to the outcome and waiting for the outcome. So my question to you is, how would you advise someone to detach or attach less to the outcome of what they're doing and focus more on what's here?
I would say two things. Number one is really deciding. Decisiveness is so powerful. When we're sort of like, maybe I'll just kind of see, we're straddling two worlds, we're kind of going forward and backwards, but really decide, where will I get my security from? Because often we think the outcome is going to be the thing that gives us the security, right? If we just know that we're going to close this deal, or I know she's going to be happy when I get home and I have this conversation with her. I know, right? And it's an illusion. Our security is often, if our security is based in the outcome, and we're only going to feel secure if we get that specific thing, we're going to operate insecure like the entire time, right? And we're setting ourselves up for massive disappointment if the outcome changes or looks different. There's so much. And so not only do we have an awful time in the process, but we're really hinging our security on an illusion, right? And so it's like, what do I want to feel secure in? And you said something great. Like, I know I can put security in me showing up and doing the best that I can. I can get my security from knowing, if I do my part, I could trust that God is going to do his part. That's, I'm a faith-based coach. I can put my security in knowing that if every time in the past where I have moved forward in alignment with what I knew was the right move, ultimately it always worked out in my favor. What are you going to put your security in? Because if it's the outcome, I'm going to say often, almost always the outcome has looked very different than I originally thought it was going to look like, right? And the second thing of that is really also deciding, how do I want to experience this process? The writing of the book is a simple example. Like, I wrote this book. It's not a little book. It's like, it was a labor of love, and there were some moments where I found myself starting to go into the old program of getting really attached, like, oh, well, what will people think? Is it going to be successful? How many are we going to sell? And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How do I want to experience writing this book? How do I want to remember my experience of sitting down and writing and being with this message, and can I really enjoy it? Like, I wanted to enjoy it like a fine meal. I'm Italian. We love long, slow meals. And then I moved to the US and it's like fast food everywhere. People are eating while they're driving. And like, how do you want to experience eating this meal? Do you just want to swallow it whole and just not digest it and not assimilate it and not enjoy it? And then you're sick to your stomach because you rushed it? Or do you want to really enjoy it and savor who you're becoming. And so I think that has been the biggest thing for me. And I just want to say, I think some of that does come from my Italian roots, because I feel growing up in Italy gave me that joie de vivre, even though that's French, like the
Yes.
joy of like enjoying and squeezing every minute out of life instead of rushing to the next thing that we're going to try to experience. And then we're not even there for that experience. So it's like, how do I want to experience this moment? Dating, when my husband and I started dating, and everyone was like, well, how is this going to work? You're in two different countries. Like, where are you going to get married? And people were asking all of these questions of the logistics and how
Yes.
fast and when. And I'm like, I just want to get to know this man. Like, I just want to enjoy him
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy us
Mm-hmm.
and, enjoy this season. And it will ripen over time, and it did. So, those two things, decide where you will place your security and decide how you want to experience it, because we're always choosing.
That's true, and thank you for reminding us of this truth that every single moment we are choosing how our experience is. No
Yes,
matter what happens on the outside, our
we're
experience
always
happens on the
choosing.
inside. It doesn't happen out there. It happens in here. So we
And
choose.
and that we're always choosing. And also, like, that was a decision I made and a program that I spoke every day, was I refuse to operate from pressure anymore.
Mhm.
So, like, I'm not going to rush. Going back to the meal analogy, I'm not going to rush this book, the podcast. I'm not going to rush this date night. I'm not going to rush, because when I rush things, I miss things. And that was a big switch, just making that decision. And then the action is like, okay, we get presented with opportunities where people are deadline, timeline, and you want to cram more things in. But I said, no, I'm going to have space in my life and my schedule to enjoy, digest, and operate from really being able to experience this thing,
Mhm.
which adds depth to our life. Right? Years of experience, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. Uh, Tell me about the book then, Christine, Drop the Armor, which is very recently you released. So tell me, who is it for? Who would really enjoy and benefit reading it?
Yes. Well, I say that the war drop the armor was written for the ultra high achiever who has really felt the tension of straddling two worlds,
Mhm.
chasing the earthly pursuits of success and growth and all of the things that, I think are encoded in our DNA. We're designed to grow. We're designed to create. We're designed to expand and increase, but also not lose ourselves in the process.
Mhm.
So bridging the gap between the earthly pursuits and desires and really the eternal things that don't have timelines, like freedom and peace and joy right here, right now. So how do I live the fullness of life? Um, and it's written for that person that has been fighting battles their whole life and building businesses and building things, and maybe is finding themselves at a crossroads, asking the same question that I was like, there must be a different way
Mhm.
to do this exceptionally well while also really, really experiencing a rich life, not only financially, but emotionally rich, relationally rich,
Mhm.
you know, rich in health, rich in memories, rich in experiences, rich in everything. And so, um, that's really who it's written for. And I'll say there's three main parts. The first part of the book is releasing the past. And that is about releasing the mental programs, the operating systems, the old identities, the wounding, all of the stuff that we carry that really is just crushing us and holding us down. And
Mhm.
it's, I said we need to pack light. So the first section is really about releasing a lot of unforgiveness that we have towards others and ourselves. Like, we carry a lot of things: bitterness, resentment, regret. The second part is really about igniting our faith. So, how to build trust, how to build our confidence, how to build our faith, how to really hear, that voice of God within, to connect with the Spirit. And the third section is really the stepping into the next season. Who are you being called? Your identity, the mission, the calling now. And it's never what it used to be, because where you were was always preparing you for where you're going, you know? And so we're always just evolving. Our identity is changing throughout our lives. I believe our calling, changes through different seasons. We have a core calling, but it evolves. And sometimes if we stay too long in one season, we start to become ill, right? Stagnant. So that's really it. It's a journey from the head to the heart, from one operating reality into another, and to really experience what I believe is the rich life that we are created for.
What does the armor represent? What is it? The
Yeah.
metaphor of that.
The metaphor of the hour. I use the
The
analogy
armor.
of,
The armor.
yes,
Yes.
the armor. I earlier when I was sharing my story, I shared that, growing up, my father was my hero. He was my first love, little girl and her father. There's nothing
Yeah.
like that, right? But he was the model of what love looked like. I was watching him, how he treated me, how he treated my mother. And, from a young age, we learn who we need to be to protect ourselves, who we need to be loved, where it's safe to be us. And we unconsciously start putting on all this self-protection, right? Well, I need to
Right.
protect myself. I'm my own provider. I need to provide for myself because my father left. I need to provide for myself because this person, I need to protect myself because the place that I thought was safe actually isn't safe. And so we put on all these protective layers that really create like walls, even in our most intimate relationships. And I hear this where, people will say, I don't know how to get close to my wife or my husband. Like, I really want to experience more intimacy, but there's like a wall there. And the wall is all those layers that we have put on of who we need to be or who we need to pretend to be or what we needed to be to get through a season. And so I believe that we're wearing so much emotional, mental, and spiritual weight that needs to be removed. And I spent 10 years in Toronto, when I had my business in Toronto, as a holistic health and performance coach. And I would have many, many people come in with autoimmune diseases, chronic pain, extra weight. And, when it came down to it, they didn't need just another diet. They didn't need just another workout program. That's what they thought they needed. But most of them had been packing on all of this emotional weight, which became physical weight, right? Or the pain in their body was always a manifestation or an outcome of years of just holding things in, suppressing, repressing, not speaking up in their marriage, not being who they are, chameleon, like pretending to please everyone. And it carries so much weight and it makes us sick from the inside out. So dropping the weight is releasing everything and anything that's inside of us that is now making us sick, weighing us down, or holding us back from this next season that God's calling us into.
Thank you for clarifying that and reminding again that of that, Christine. Where will you direct the listener that wants to find out more and connect? And your book,
Yes.
of course.
The book, well, of course, one of the things I'm doing we're on a big podcast tour right now. We're doing 100 podcast episodes in a very short amount of time. And yes. And I'm giving away the first chapter along with the love letter. There's a series of love letters in this book. They're called the warrior letters. So I'm giving that away to all of the listeners of your podcast so they can go to thechristinejewell.com/drop it. And then you'll get the first chapter, the warrior letter, for free. If you love it, there'll be a link there where you can buy the book. I would love for you to buy the book. And we are creating a really beautiful experience around the book where when you opt in for the free resources that go with it, you'll also get an audio bundle of guided visualizations, a journal with the self-reflection questions, as well as a playlist. So we're creating a full experience around this because we don't want this just to be a book that people read and put on their bookshelf. I want it to move you at a cellular level. Like, I want it to affect your soul and your bones. And so we are creating a multidimensional experience, audio, visual, writing, reading, so that whether you're a kinesthetic learner, a visual learner, or an audio learner, it is going to penetrate you. So thechristinejewell.com/drop it. That's the first place. And if you opt in for that, you'll get the links to everything else.
Thank you. I liked very much this multi-dimensional approach and let's say holistic learning. It's not
Yes,
just intellectual. It is. It has. But yeah, we learn by experience anyway. We don't learn by just reading something. We have to do it.
correct.
So brings
Mhm.
it back to what we were saying earlier on today. Uh, Christina, I have two final quick questions that I always ask my guests. And the
Okay.
first one is, what does personal development mean to you?
Mm. I believe that too. Personal development to me is remembering more and more of the woman I'm already created to be, and I already am, and I'm removing the layers. So every time I lean in, I develop. I'm not really developing myself. I'm actually remembering and recovering more and more, and I'm just removing
Hmm.
the garbage. There's a famous quote that says, "It's not who we think we are that holds us back; it's who we think we're not." And so
Yeah.
I really believe it's about removing all of the noise and really stepping into the full skin of who you are and what you're here to do. And there's a unique purpose and design for each of us. And I believe that when we find that intersection where we know that we're living in that pocket, we come alive in ways that we never have experienced before.
Thank you. And hypothetically, if you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give her?
Oh, I would just give that 18-year-old version of me to really trust your inner knowing, your inner gut. Be the light, be 100% of who you are, and never water yourself down, because every time you dim yourself down, you water yourself down, and you start doubting yourself, you are going to get off on the wrong exit. It's going to be the wrong exit. And then you're going to learn some hard lessons, and then you're going to get back on. So if you can stay with that North Compass, and be 100% of who you were created to be. Shine your light. Don't apologize for being you. There's only one of you. And again, everything beautiful happens when we're being fully, authentically who we were created to be. And I believe that ultimately, whether people are doing coaching or personal development, really, like, the answers are already inside of us. We're just being redirected back to the truth that we already know. So I would say you already know. You already know. Just trust and move and release anything that is trying to, don't compromise yourself.
Thank you. I think that would, apart from a 18-year-old advice for an 18-year-old, I think that advice would apply to all ages.
Yes.
Yes. Christine, I want to thank you very much for this conversation. I found it very useful, and it was very insightful, and there were many actionable things one could take from it. I want to wish you all the very best with your life and with your mission. And I will leave it to you for your parting wisdom.
Yes, I will end where I started, because I believe this is the through line and really the message that I have, that I believe everything that you are waiting for, longing for, seeking is actually waiting for you. And it's on the other side of you letting go of the things that you are holding on so tightly to. So everything you are looking for is actually waiting on you. It's already looking for you. And I want you to imagine that your fists are clenched really tight and you're holding on so tightly to something, and you're just like, but I can't, anything but this, I'll do anything. This thing that you're holding on so tightly, that's the thing. That's the key that opens the next door.
And before I end today's episode, if you enjoy this podcast, can you think of one person that would find it useful and share it with them? I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow, and you also add value to people you care about. Thank you. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,